Okay. Someone's waving, thanks. Come on, how many people have been to conference? Excellent, wow. Okay, brilliant, you just stopped dead, great. Okay, right, welcome everyone. Hello. Bit better, welcome everyone. Hello. There you go, right, you know how this works by now. So, just very, very quickly before we kick off, who's new? Who's not been before? Put your hands up. Oh, excellent, about half. We're almost a full house tonight as well, so that's amazing. Thank you very much, everyone. So, with no further ado, I'm your warm-up act, by the way, tonight. So I'm not going to be here for long, you'll be pleased to hear, before the main event starts. So this is Cambridge Agile Exchange, and tonight's event is a special one-off event. So we don't normally turn these around this quickly, so we apologise if this feels a little bit rushed tonight, because we've had a couple of weeks to do this. Now we've got that out of the way. So tonight we're here to listen to Woody Zuill about Beyond Estimates. So we are hugely honoured to have Woody here tonight with us. We certainly weren't expecting this, but we're very pleased to have Woody here tonight. So when he comes on in a second, big round of applause, everyone, please. So just very, very quickly, just to go through our normal bits and pieces. So our vision, I'm not going to read through all of that, but for those of you that have been before, we are just a group of people that came together with a shared belief around agile, lean techniques and views, and wanted to share our knowledge. We don't do this for money. These events are free. We're not charging for this. This is just for us to exchange ideas and share thoughts with each other. We're certainly not saying we're the experts on this at all, as you could probably tell by now, but we love to get everyone together and share ideas, workshops, conference discussions, those sorts of things as well. So that's the main reason that we formed this group, and obviously all of you people are here, and we love the fact that we've got so many of you here tonight as well. So, very quickly on our code of conduct, this is really important to us. There's a couple of copies of this scattered all over the seats as well, so please have a look at that. That's the detailed one you've got on your seats. The short version of this is just be kind to one another. Just be respectful of everyone's views, etc. there. If you have any issues at any point, please don't pause to come and speak to any of us. The organisers, if you just put your hands up, organisers. Simon and Marcus at the back, and Sunir downstairs, and me. So if any questions at any point, sorry, Sunir over there, sorry, I didn't see you. That's awful. So come and speak to any of us at any point. If you've got any questions, any concerns at all, come and speak to us, and we will sort that for you. But that's very important to us. So if everyone can abide by that, we'll have a great night. A couple of other things. So as you've probably gathered by now, we're a little bit into social media. So we've got our Twitter page, which we'd love you to follow if you're not already. We've got our Facebook page, where you can catch us on there with more detailed discussions, and our Slack channel as well. So if you're not on Slack yet, then please join. We do need your email address in order to do that, and I promise you we're not selling it to a third party. We won't sign you up for any dodgy mailing list at all. Once we've got your email address, then that's it, we delete it. Once we've hooked you up to Slack, we do not store these details at all. But if you want to be involved on there, then you do need to provide that to us, and then we can send you the invite. Okay, so, and very quickly as well, we've got our Medium page. So this is on a bit of a slow burn at the moment, because it just seems to be me and Simon that are blogging on there at the moment, but we would love everyone's contributions for that page. It is for the community, it's not just for us to use as an echo chamber, so if anyone's got any thoughts or experience or techniques that they've found have really worked with their teams, we'd love you to share a blog post on there about it. If you do an event here, we'd love you to do a follow-up blog post or a series of blog posts afterwards, talking about what you learned and what you shared with people as well. So feel free to join the Medium page. You can follow us there. You can follow any of the contributors, and then you can contribute to that page as well. And again, it's part of the community sharing that we want to get into with this group. Okay, a couple more slides, and then we're on to the main event. So, coming up over the next couple of months, so we've got our friend of CAE next month, Roy Marriott. I do not believe Roy is with us tonight. Probably at a conference presenting, but we do have him for one night next month where he'll be doing his Generating Change workshop. Definitely not one to miss. This is going around most of the conferences this year, so if you can get to that one, that's definitely one that's worth going to. And then, strangely, in August, we've got my boss, who's doing a presentation. So I'll be on my best behaviour that night. But again, you're going to get first sight of this in August, because Chris will be presenting this for the first time at Agile Cambridge in September. So we get it first. So again, that's definitely not one to miss. And then we've got events being planned for the rest of this year. If you have got any ideas or thoughts of your own, or if you've done a conference talk before and you want to repeat that, or a workshop or techniques, then please come and speak to us, because we don't just want this to be us four presenting here. We want this to be everyone in our group that's presenting these ideas. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Woody. As I said, we're hugely honoured for Woody to be here tonight with us. So quick round of applause and I'll hand over to Woody.
See if this thing's working. Good. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate this. I'm going to grab my drink from over here. So we're going to talk about beyond estimates, which is kind of a controversial topic. For whatever reason, I think it's a little silly. I don't think it needs to be controversial, but I do think it's something important we should be talking about. Let's see if this comes on. It's getting there. It's not there yet. Input B. Did I pick up the right cable? All right. So I'm a software developer. I've been writing software since 1982 or so, before most of you were born. Just kidding. I have no clue when you were born. I'm going to go. You know what? I want to change one slide here. This is my special Cambridge slide. My great-grandfather, 8 or 9 great-grandfathers back, was Francis Dane, who was born in Bishop Stortford. Am I saying that right? Is that how you would say that? And he went to King's College. And after that, he came to the U.S., but it wasn't called the U.S. back then, with his folks, and settled near Boston. So if you see people around here look like that, they're probably relatives of mine. Anyways, he's kind of an amazing guy, and his daughter, Abigail Faulkner Dane, was one of the Salem witch trial witches. She was tried and sentenced to death, and they didn't kill her because she was pregnant with a child, which is not a direct ancestor of mine, but because of him, I think I probably exist, because they couldn't kill her because she was with child, and by the time they sorted things out, they'd stopped killing witches, which I understand here they used to do too, right? So yeah, it's kind of a universal thing, I guess. You gotta, if there's witches, you gotta kill them, I guess. I don't know. But he was quite a character, but I just want to kind of say that's my little connection to Cambridge, and that way you think of me more as a human than otherwise. So there you go. I'm just an average person like the rest of you. I don't think I have any particularly brilliant thoughts, but I stumbled upon this idea of, pardon me, problems with estimates almost 30 years ago in stuff other than software development. And we don't have a lot of time today, so I'm going to see where I can go with this. So I have some exercises we could do. I'm not sure we have time to do the exercises, but I do have one that I'd like to start with, and we're going to need some Post-it notes. Is anybody here a Scrum Master? Like a Scrum? Okay, Scrum Masters are good at handing out Post-it notes. It's like their primary trait. And look at that, you can see. So everybody needs one Post-it note. You might need more later, but you need one right now, so pass them down as quick as you can. Faster than that, much faster than that. You don't even have any up this front row yet, right? Let's get you some more Post-it notes. Post-it notes are like a fundamental and most important aspect of software development in an agile manner. Just take one Post-it note and pass it down. I'm going to be gathering from you one idea rather quickly. With an agile group, I would kind of expect everybody to bring their own Post-it notes. Hokey doke. Everybody have a Post-it note and something to write with? You need to have a pen of some sort. There are some Sharpies, but we might be running out of those pretty quick. So everybody got a, if you don't have a pen, you can borrow one from your neighbor. So after they write, I'm going to have you write one word on this Post-it note. One word. What I want you to write down essentially is, what is an estimate? A word you could use in place of estimate. Essentially, what is an estimate? Write it down quick as you can. Don't think about it. Write it down. And as soon as you've got it, bring it up here or hand it to somebody across the way and we'll bring it up here. And there's plenty of Scrum Masters here. They can do that too. Write it down and then get it up here quick as you can. What is an estimate? Bring them on up here quick as you can. We don't have all day. Get up there as quick as you can. When I first started considering the problems with estimates, it mostly had to do with custom manufacturing. And now just about everything I do has to do with software, and it's very closely related. Go ahead and just put them up there anywhere. You don't need to group them, just get them up there. Yeah, there you go. Okay, we'll come back to this later. I want to do this. The reason I do this right up front is I want to get this information up here before I've tainted your thinking. So now it's up here, and we'll revisit this in a little while. So I used to call this estimates or no estimates, but I've started calling it beyond estimates lately, at least a little bit, because, warning to you, if you tweet about no estimates, there are people who you could think of maybe as trolls who will start attacking you and telling you what an awful person I am. And I'm fine with that, actually, because it's because of them that I'm even here in Cambridge today. In 2013, well, in 2012, I'll tell the story in a bit, but I first started using that hashtag to relate to a specific blog post I wrote. And it was all the controversy about that that got me invited to my first international conference up in Malmö, Sweden. I don't think anybody would know that I exist if it wasn't for these people attacking me about my thinking on estimates. So I honor them for that, and I appreciate that they would do that. But I just wanted to warn you, if you tweet about this, you will probably hear from some of them. So here we go. I have 83 parts, each takes about an hour. So I don't know how long we're going to have to go here, but be prepared to be here a long time. I always start with this at every talk I give. I'm not here to tell you what to do or whether or not you should do something. I'm just here to share with you something that I've done. And maybe some of my thinking could be useful or helpful to you, but it hopefully will spark some kind of ideas. So that's what I'm doing this for. A couple warnings. People become very defensive when talking about estimates and the problems with estimates. I don't want anybody here becoming defensive, so hold it in, bite your tongue. If you start bleeding out of your side of your mouth because you're biting your tongue so hard, we'll get help for you. So don't you worry about it. Try to keep an open mind. That's what I'm trying to ask you to do. Some of these ideas might not work in your organization, and my dad used to say this. That's my dad, by the way, before I met him, a little bit before I met him. That's probably 20 years before I met him. He used to say this: there's 1,000 right ways to do anything. We should never think that ours is the one right way. So I thought that was a pretty good saying. He was an engineer. Sort of. He was you might consider like a systems engineer nowadays in the phone company. He designed switching stations and things like that. So keep an open mind. When I first started talking about this publicly was about 15 years ago. And some of the thinking was based on two jobs that I had. I had a job in 1999 from January till April, a 3-month contract to take care of some work that was, a company was getting sued by their customers, and they wanted to stop the lawsuits. So they hired the company I was working for to go and meet with each of these customers, figure out how to resolve the problems that were causing the lawsuits so they could move forward. And that's what we did. That person didn't use any estimates. All the work that he did was very much in an agile manner, but there was no agile in those days. So we might have called it, he was doing extreme programming. But the first thing he would do is fly to the customer, the end user of the software, a big government place or maybe a municipality or something, meet with them for a few days. So that's right out of the Agile Manifesto. You face-to-face with the customer. And then he would fly back, give instructions to us as to what to do. Within 2 or 3 days of taking on each one of these end customers, we had some beginning solutions, and within 2 weeks or less, we ended up with helping each one of these, and we got rid of all those lawsuits. So after having that experience, I really loved it, and I thought, I'm really glad I'm in this industry. It was my first full-time job as a programmer. I'd been programming more than 15 years before that, but only for my own self, for a company that I owned, and we would use the software that I was writing. So this gave me a chance to be in the big world of software. And immediately after that, I started looking for another opportunity like that one, where people were really enlightened about how they did software development, and I stumbled upon this one. This was a company in my area, San Diego, that had, so this was 20 years ago, this year. Matter of fact, almost like right now, because it would have been about April of 1999. It was a large critical project for them. Over 200 developers they'd hired to do this work. It was IID. All you Agilists here, what's IID? What's that? Iterative and incremental development. I'm glad somebody knows that here, because this is an important history. If you forget this, who will remember and who will care? That's sort of an Agile idea, but this was in the pre-Agile times. They were going to do 6-week iterations. I was really used to delivering software daily at this other place, but here we go, 6-week iterations. At least they were doing iterations. This is weird to me. 2 weeks of design, which included refining the requirements, deciding exactly what we would do, so we had to know how long it would take. We're going to do estimates of how long it would take so we can take on enough work for this 6-week iteration. Then we would code for 2 weeks, and then we'd do testing and integration for 2 weeks. This seems arbitrary to me. 2 weeks, what does that mean? But 6-week iterations made sense. Then we're going to do lessons learned. Lessons learned is what we nowadays call a retrospective. That all seemed really good to me. So I took the contract, and off we went. This represents the 200 developers. They were all mostly half my age. Some of them were as young as 21 or 22. The oldest of them was 27 that I can recall. There were a couple managers that were older. The oldest manager was 32. Now there may be some people here that young. I'm not an ageist, and I know you have a code of conduct. I don't mean to upset anybody, but there's something wrong with a 32-year-old managing 200 developers. 32 years old. Tell me, what might that problem be? Lack of experience. Lack of failure. I was 45 years old at the time, and I'd already failed lots. And it's really easy for me to spot it coming down the road. And I thought, boy, this is going to be problematic. So here we charged off to do our work, and then we did our first lessons learned. At the end of 6 weeks, every 6 weeks, we do this lessons learned. I signed up for a 3-month contract. So we weren't going to get a lot of those in 3 months. How long is a 3-month project, by the way? 1.5 to 2 years. Okay. So this did take almost 2 years to do this project. I only stayed for the first 6 months of it, and you'll see why. So the first thing, I noticed 3 things that were really not working well that came out during their retrospective. The first one was their estimates were off. So our estimates are off. What should we do about it? What do you think they did about it? What's that? Spend more time doing your estimates. So this is what they said. We need to get better at estimating. That's basically what we're saying. The next one was the requirements weren't clear when we started. What do we do about that?
Blame someone else.
Oh, blame someone else. An advanced manager knows how to do that, but these were just kids. What are they going to learn to do? What are they going to do?
Spend more time.
We're going to have to learn how to better understand the requirements. Now, they were offering to get us training for these things, and we did get trained in these things. The third one was the requirements kept changing. So what do we do about that? What's the old-fashioned, typical way to solve for that? Freeze them. We're not going to change. We're not going to allow the changes. That's called change control. I noticed immediately there's a pattern here, and I'd seen it before, but I didn't open my mouth. I was just one of 200 developers. I didn't want to lose my job right out the bat. Plus, these things look really closely related to me. So off we went. They gave us some training. We worked hard to get better at estimates. Worked hard. We got trained into how to get better at our requirements and to control the changes. And off we rushed to do the work. The kids still looked like this. Off we did. We rushed to do the work. And at the end of 6 weeks, we did the next lessons learned. I noticed 3 things that were clearly a big problem. Does anybody want to tell me what those were? Estimates. We didn't understand the requirement. I don't need to tell you. There it is. So how do they decide to fix it? The same exact way. Now, I really was noticing a pattern here, and then I decided not to speak about it because I didn't want to get canned on the job. That means fired. Does canned mean getting fired here? All right. I don't know. It's like local to the U.S., maybe. So off we charged again. This is the 3rd iteration. 4.5 months into it now, I think, we had a 3rd lessons learned. I noticed 3 things that were the big problems in the retrospective. I don't need to tell you. There they were. And they're going to train us to get better at this, and off it went. So it was about that time I started looking for another contract. This, remember, is in 1999. If you could spell VB, you could get a job as a programmer. So I knew that I could just go find another job. No problem. So here we were, 3 iterations. They decided they were getting the same problem each time, and they were going to solve it the same way. And I noticed a pattern. Did you notice the pattern? Okay, so basically, we do our work, we discover we have some problems, we decide to fix the problems the same way over and over again. That is not a healthy pattern. At that time, there was a big patterns movement across the world in software development. Some of you will remember. And I decided to give this pattern a name, and I called it the cycle of continuous no improvements. And I stood up in that last meeting, and I said, so do you notice, I asked them, that there's a pattern here? We have the same problem, we try to solve it the same way, and we still have the same problem, and we try to solve it the same way. And that's an indication that we're not trying to solve the problem, is we're dealing with symptoms. We need to understand the problem, so what might the problem be? So I talked to them a little bit about the difference of symptoms and problems. If you have a symptom, and you try to solve it, and it doesn't solve anything, what might the real problem be? Now, I was asking them these questions. At the end, and usually if I was doing this as a workshop, I would do this, we would be doing that ourselves here. We'd talk about this. It doesn't matter that much, but this is telling me that we were working on the wrong thing. And I said to them this, we cannot know a lot of this stuff ahead of time because it's in the doing of the work that we discover the work that we must do. It wasn't until we started doing the work that we would discover that our estimates weren't useful, that our requirements weren't well understood. Beforehand, we thought everything was great. In the doing, we expose reality. This is what I was sharing with them. The next day, I came into work, and for about a week, I noticed this phenomenon. This represents me and everybody else. I was being ostracized. I walked down the hall. These are all young people, could be my children, who are now not talking to me, and I was becoming friends with a lot of them. We go by, I lived in the area, San Diego. Most of them come from other parts of the country or even other parts of the world. And we were taking bike rides together. I was taking them hiking. I know all the spots to go, show them all the great areas around San Diego. We'd have lunch together. We were playing music together. I play music, and a lot of kids in software development in those days were playing music. Nowadays, I don't know, because this was 20 years ago. I decided to figure out why. Now, some of you probably read, there's a book some people have read, that has a story about this guy, and he's leading his people. They all got released, I guess, from a work program, and they're going to walk across the sea, and the sea spreads open for them, okay? And as the sea spreads open, they're walking on dry land to cross this sea. Some of you probably saw the movie anyways. And so it was what it was like. I could walk down the middle of these kids down the hallway, and they all just are spreading around me. And so I came to one, and I put my hands out like this. And I said, "Hey, Jim!" And he couldn't get away. This is another problem with young people. They think if an old person is standing there with their hands out, they're trapped. But he couldn't easily run underneath either of my arms. But he didn't know what to do. It's like a deer in the headlights. And I said, "Jim, what's going on? Why won't anybody talk to me?" And he said, "The managers told us not to talk with you." So it was a very different problem than what I originally thought. I thought they weren't seeing the pattern, but the bigger problem is this. There was no safety to even question what we were doing. There was no safety, and I think no estimates is merely an indication. It's a placeholder for a bigger conversation. Can we safely question the status quo? At this company, they couldn't fire me, luckily, because I found out I had been hired by the consulting firm who hired most of these kids that were working for the consulting firm. They had hired me as an employee of the client. So to fire me would have taken more action and probably wasn't worth trying to do. So they just said, "Don't talk to the guy." So the beginnings of this whole thing in 1999 was I realized I needed to learn to speak in front of people, because at that time I was too reluctant to get in front of an audience. A group this size would have petrified me. Usually I could talk in front of a group of 5 or 6 people in a meeting, but anything bigger than that was too scary for me. And the story I wanted to share was basically this. The object isn't to create or to make art. It's to be in that wonderful state which makes art inevitable. This means we have to have an environment so great things can happen. This is a quote from Robert Henry. Some people tell me that should be Robert Henry, but he was from Nebraska, and he pronounced it Robert Henry. He was a famous artist in the Ashcan movement. It was an anti-academic movement in the U.S. about 100 and something years ago. I love this quote, and I've lived by this since I was in my 20s. If we create the environment where great things can happen, great things will happen. And I realized I need to be able to share these things so that I could have an industry to work in where it's easy to have great things happen. And at that time, at that particular job anyways, I could tell this was not a place where great things could happen. They did go on and they finished the project. It took them almost 2 years. They delivered it into production, and it took them about another year to cancel the project because it never did what they wanted it to do. They spent $75 million US dollars in 1999 money. So that's a lot of money. I haven't even made that much in my life, and I wouldn't know how to waste that much money if I had it. They just wasted. I could have given the same waste for half that cost. So I don't even know why they bothered to do this. Okay. So I want to quickly talk about the hashtag. I first tweeted this in December of 2012, no estimates hashtag. That's the first use of it. And it was to reference an article I'd written for Ron Jeffries. Ron Jeffries is an Agilist who was one of the people who wrote the Agile Manifesto. I wrote an article. He was asking me, because I was tweeting with him about how I had worked on a project where we didn't use estimates. He said, "Well, how does that work?" And I tried to explain it to him. He couldn't understand. He said, "Why don't you write a blog post about it?" So I did that, and I put that hashtag on it, because I basically had this project where we did not use estimates, which means there were no estimates. So this is what it means. I like this picture here. That's my wife's conception of how I might have looked when I was 12 or 13 at my first job. I still kind of look like that, but anyways. It's not a commandment. I'm not saying thou shalt not do estimates or thou shalt do no estimates. This isn't like a commandment, and it's not a declaration like a protest. We will not do estimates. It was just me simply sharing a project I'd worked on where we didn't do estimates. We didn't need them. And that project was back in 2003. I have many like that since then. So rather than, let's skip through this real quick. I think we already did that. I want to have a very specific definition of what is an estimate. Because if we do anything more than a very constrained little area, we will be covering too much stuff. Almost everywhere I go, people want to tell me, but when I get my kitchen remodeled, I need to know how long it will take, and I need to know how much it'll cost. Now, I don't know how many people get their kitchens remodeled, but clearly enough people know that's one of the most common arguments I hear. They want to argue with me about kitchen remodels. I don't really care about kitchen remodels. I'm talking about software development. There's lots of things estimates can be useful for. One example is I can estimate how much it will cost, the budget I would need for a team of developers for a year. I've had to do it many times. Very easily. I can take last year's costs of how much is our space costing us, and the desks, and the upgrades to software, upgrades to hardware. Do we need to hire a new person? I can figure all that out, put it in a budget, submit that to the higher-ups, and there you go. They've got their budget for next year. That's useful, I guess, to them. I'm not sure it's really that meaningful, but they want it. We're going to go to this now. I'm going to break something here. Oh, I'm going to keep this plugged in, because if that runs out of battery, I wish I had not let that happen. Okay, I'm going to real quickly put this together. It looks like you are quite advanced here. It looks like a very advanced group. This will take me a minute, so give me a moment. There's some here that are rather, they're outside the scope of your, I read this here, so let's be cautious in our usage of terms, okay? I like this one. It's a stab. Oh my goodness. There's a lot of these. This board does not want to work well for me. Oh, I see another good one here. You can see how this, you all saw this as you stuck your stickies up here. Those are good ones. Okay. This is overwhelming. Why did you bother coming out? You don't need me. Okay. Maybe somebody's got some tape or something that we can fix this with. Oh, come on. I'm going to see if I've got some. I've been traveling around for a long time, and there's only a few things I really think it's important to have. And one of them is this blue tape. Okay. That works, right? Oh, look at, boy, you are already a very cynical kind of a group here. Well, that's an interesting one. Okay, there are some things here I usually expect to see, but I'm not quite seeing here. Okay, that's good enough. Okay, this is what I normally will see, some kind of a distribution like it's on this slide. What you have here is guess, and here's someone who used more than one word. The closest guess at whatever a particular measurement is without actually measuring. Okay, but that's a guess. Here's one that says a prediction. What's a prediction? Okay, it's a guess. And here we got complexity, size, or effort, and something that says check. So do we mean that if we give them a good estimate, they'll give us a check? Or what does this mean? What does that mean?
Almost a check between yourself and somebody else. By estimate.
Okay, so it's a way to see if we're thinking about the same. Here we've got one that says it's a conversation. If your boss comes to you at the beginning of the day and says, hey, you know, by the end of the day, we need to have your conversation, would you think that means that I need to have your estimate? It could be about having a conversation. That could be part of it, but it's not what that is. And here's one that says it's a contract. So I would say that's a high dysfunction if that's really what we're using. Here's one that says it's an instinct. Does that mean like it's our gut feeling? Something like that? And here's one, we're starting to get real, it's an illusion. That's good. Here's an even better one, it's a fantasy. And it's restrictive. So I think these are about the dysfunctions of it. It's an assessment, I'm not sure where that goes. It's an attempt. So, hey, I need your attempt by the end of the day. I don't know if your boss would ever come to you and say that, but where does that fit in here? I'm not sure. And here's one that says assessment. So I think assessment and a guess is probably similar. Look at the ones that we have there. Very similar years, but they had a few others. A plan. So this is the way I would say it. An estimate is a kind of a guess that we do about the time it will take to do something. Sometimes we say the size or the effort or the work, but we're really almost always interested in something to do with time, which translates into costs of different kinds. So we could do some planning and budgeting. And then these are kind of dysfunctions down here. So we can have a deadline, an expectation, a commitment. One of these that said promise. This is the problem that I see with estimates. Uh-oh, I just unplugged something while I did that. We're going to try this again. This is really touchy. It's trying to get hooked up. This won't make it do anything. This is just to forward that. Okay, so we're going to have to stop the show and restart it to get it to do the screen sharing properly. The mirroring. Excellent. Here's a group that was just mostly CTOs. What do you notice first about theirs? They use a lot of words. They started in on it, and they weren't getting their thing. I usually say, come on, get it done real quick. And they weren't getting it done real quick. And I said, what's the problem? And so I said, I need more words. And everybody said, yeah, we need more words. So I said, okay, give me more words. Look what they got. Best guess. Educated guess. Current best guess. Like informed guess. A guess about how long something will take. Can't you just write a guess? A quantified guess with a confidence interval. Have any of you ever worked with confidence intervals? Do you know what that is? So essentially what you do is first of all, you make the estimate. And they want it as a range, which is an estimate about your estimate. Right? So if you go to someone and they say, well, it'll take 4 to 5 months. Are they going, oh yeah, it's always going to be less, so I'm sure it'll be 4 months? No, they're saying, yeah, it's going to be at least 5 months. So it's like this range is an estimate on our estimate because people think we need ranges. And they say, well, how confident are you? And that gives our confidence interval. Well, we're about 70% confident. So we made an estimate about our estimate of our estimate. Is that useful? I don't think that's useful. Approximate amount of X. So they try to get a lot into that. A prediction of time. A prediction is just a guess. I love this one. My guess that I feel comfortable with. An educated guess at how long, so we already did that one. And then we went to some of these. What it takes to do it, I think that is a guess. Best case, time to complete. Would you ever operate on the best case, time to complete? The answer to when is the end. Again, I don't think it's the answer. It's our guess at it. When will you be done? I think that probably could go. And a promise. So promise is kind of a dysfunction of estimates. Promises aren't that good. So let's do an estimate. I'm going to give you a little bit of a requirement. 3 months from today, you have to write your name on a white index card with a blue fountain pen. The start of the work is the minute you start on that bit of work. 3 months from now. How long will it take you on that day to write your name on a white index card with a blue fountain pen? Somebody tell me. Don't be afraid. 3 hours. Well, so you've had 3 months to be ready. How long is it going to take you to write your name? A minute, let's say. Okay, for me, I had a company where I had to write about 150 paychecks or something every Friday, and I had to sign them. I just needed to sign them. I could write my name like in a half a second. It's like chunk, chunk, chunk. You just write down the thing. Here's the thing. Let's change it slightly. Right now, you need to write your name on a white index card with a blue fountain pen. How long will it take?
6 hours.
6 hours. So why would it take 6 hours when before we said it would take a few seconds? We need to prep. We need to go get a blue fountain pen. We need to get a white index card. Now, luckily, I happen to be given a gift of a fountain pen a few trips back, and it has blue ink in it. I will warn you, don't get on an airplane with this, because it will leak all over your case. Okay. So, I got the fountain pen, I got my card, I write it down, I take it to the product owner. They say, no, no, no. I said a blue fountain pen. I said, it's blue. No, it's blue ink. You used a yellow fountain pen. This doesn't meet my requirements. And your index card has blue lines on it. Not allowed. You know what index cards are, right? They're like putting your recipe box or whatever. There's a lot wrong with this thing. But the reason I share this with you is two of the types of times that could be important. The actual work time, which is not important, versus the cycle time, which is important. Now we would say, well, this has to do with how much we're going to charge, but usually it isn't. Cycle time is what we're interested in. That's, you know, when will this thing be done? Now there's another kind called lead time. We're not going to worry about that today. We don't have enough time. In software development, we can measure cycle time, and it's going to be different for each thing we work on, but we can't predict it. This is the important thing. We think that we can predict it, but we can't. How long will it take from beginning to end to accomplish this thing? Sorry, did you want to get a picture of that? Well, I could go back. Look, we will wait. Go ahead, please. Now, I just added this recently. I really like this picture. I'm not going to go over the stuff that's on the bottom of it. So I want this working definition. Here's the definition I want to use. An estimate is a guess about the amount of time, usually the work time, which it should be the cycle time, to create a project, a feature, some bit of work in software development. When you go to a software developer on your team, let's say you have 40 people, and you go to a couple of the developers and say, hey, we need some estimates for this work coming up, we're never asking them for the cycle time. We're asking them for the work time. How long will it take to do this work? Now, it's a bit of a, I'm going to be really bold here. To me, it's ludicrous that a manager of software development would go to a developer to ask for an estimate. If the manager doesn't know, what business do they have being a manager of software development? Now, I've owned a number of companies, something like 16 to 20 companies. I was counting them the other day. One of them was a signage company where we had installation equipment. And I knew what it cost to install a sign on the side of a building. We're going to have 5 crew members. They have to leave in the morning before the traffic starts, or we're going to spend most of our day sitting in traffic. And once you get there, I know how long it takes to put the ladders up, get the crane in place, get the sign off the machine, off the truck, lift it up in place, have electricians drilling holes, people running wires. I know all that. I don't have to ask one of my installation crew, how long will it take you to do your work today? The manager knows that stuff. But in software development, the managers relegate that to the, well, let's look at it this way. If a software developer is handed some work to do, who does he hand that work to? If a software developer is handed some work to do, who does she hand that work to? They do it themselves. Have you ever seen, you know the Three Stooges? Have you ever heard of the Three Stooges? It's kind of a comedy group, if you could call it comedy. Oh, I hope that doesn't break your... let me read this again. I want to make sure I don't offend anybody, because I don't really think it was that funny, but I was a little kid when they were still on television and stuff. And they got Curly and they got Larry and Moe, right? So Mo, the guy hands Moe something. He goes, get this done. And he takes it and he turns to Larry. And Larry gets it, and Mo goes, get this done. And Larry takes it and he hands it to Curly. And Curly gets it and goes, and there's no one to hand it to. Developers are like the Curlys of software development. They don't have anybody else to hand it to. They're stuck with having to do it. If they're asked to do an estimate, they do an estimate. How many of you have ever been asked to do an estimate? Almost everybody here. A show of hands. When you're asked to do an estimate, are you happy? Show of hands. Does this make you happy? A few of you. A little bit. Oh, good, I get to do an estimate that I know later on is going to backfire on me. That's okay. How many of you have asked someone else to do an estimate? Show of hands. Does that make you feel good? Show of hands. Why are we doing this kind of stuff to ourselves? I worked at a place for about 6-7 years, and my manager, he had been a developer right along with me, and we complained about this stuff all the time. But when you become a manager, something goes wrong in your brain, and he started asking us for estimates. And so he came to me one day and said, Woody, you got to get your estimates in. Everybody else has got theirs done. I say, I can't estimate this. There's not enough information to even understand what we're going to be doing. He said, look, Anders got his estimates in. Curdy got her estimates in. Greg got his estimates in. So I thought, well, I'll go talk to Curdy, Greg, and Anders. And I went and talked to each one of them individually. Curdy said, I take the list of stories that I'm supposed to estimate. This was in the days before story points. Story points are besides not something you should use. We'll talk about that in a bit. And she looks at the list and she just makes a kind of a guess based on what she thinks that story, or in those days they were just requirements, were about. And she would make her guess there. She would take time to think about it. Then I went to Greg and I asked Greg, I said, what do you do? Oh, I don't even read it. I just put down a bunch of low numbers because the boss likes low numbers. And Anders, and this is true, everything I'm telling you is exactly what happened. Anders said, I just write down a bunch of high numbers. I don't want to get stuck being blamed for not getting something done according to my estimates. So I went back to my desk and I used Anders' mechanism. I just wrote a bunch of high numbers and I took them to my boss. And I said, I did your estimates. Oh, thank you. I said, I just made up a bunch of high numbers. And what do you think he said? Said, thank you. And then I said, what do you do with these numbers? And he said, oh, I'll show you. I came around and he had a nice, Microsoft project style thing. I just put the numbers in. And now I have a schedule. Is that like real estimates? That's how mostly it's done nowadays. Now, do you use the story, what do they call that? Planning poker? Is anybody, are you not too embarrassed to admit you use planning poker? Okay. Okay. Planning poker was a technique that James Grenning, and I see some people saying Ron Jeffries as well, had started with in a specific case for a specific purpose, and they say the way we're using them is totally wrong. But I watched a group. I'm gonna use a post-it note to give an example. I had a guy that I was. I'm going to use this batch because I think I can use these again later. So I went to review a group's practices, and this was, I used to do this a bit. People invite me in to look at how they're doing things and give them advice. And I was watching a team in a planning meeting. Now this is a Scrum-style planning meeting, which really essentially means we're going to make up some stuff and then we're going to pretend that was what we're going to do in the next 2 weeks. So the product owner, so we've got these things stuck up on the wall. These are stories. These are representing stories. And the product owner and the Scrum Master will walk over to the board, and the Scrum Master say, well, which one do you want to do next? Oh, this one. Okay, and he'd show it to everybody. They'd read it, and they'd say, now it's time to vote. And then everybody would hold up their voting cards or whatever. And, oh, everybody's a 3. Well, this is going to be easy. So we put 3 on there, and it goes on to our plan. And then the next one comes off. And let's vote on it. Everybody holds up a 5. We're all exactly right on. Great. So off we go. Then the next one comes, and I'm watching very carefully. And while the product owner and the manager were turned around, the tech lead held up a number to everybody and put it back down. Developers are actually quite smart, and they can smell this thing a mile away, and they don't want to sit there and go through this pretend estimating system. So all done, and the Scrum Master came and said, these people are brilliant. They are right there. They're really aligned. And so I talked to the developer, the lead guy later. He's actually somebody I've known for a while. And I said, I could see what you were doing. What's going on? And he said, if we put up different numbers, he makes us argue about it. And we're sick of this. This is not estimating. It is meaningless. What happens when we don't have the same number? We're going to have a conversation. But what happens when we do have the same number? Does that mean that we are actually in agreement about something? Or does it just mean that our numbers are the same? That I think it's a 3 for this thing, and someone else thinks it's a 3 for that thing, and somebody else thinks it's a 3 for this other thing, and we should have made it then a 9. It is meaningless. I'm watching for when the team is all the same, and that's usually going to be the one that we understand the least. When there's differences, maybe, so I don't like using planning poker. I was sort of forced to do that. That would have been back in 2007, and it just makes no sense. I hope you're not too many of you are using it. If you have to use it in your process, remember, not everything that I'm going to talk about is applicable at your place of work, but please get a better job. I have an exercise I want to do here, but we just don't have the time to do. So, next time something big happens in Cambridge with a conference or something, make sure you get me here, and we'll do some of these other exercises. Let's talk about why we do estimates. Why do we do estimates? Somebody tell me.
For the managers.
Oh, the managers want it. So why do the managers want it? What are they going to do with it? They're going to get predictability. They want predictability. Right. Do estimates give them predictability? It gives you an illusion of predictability. So we know we're going to need to have a certain number of people. And so we do the estimates. So who's doing the estimates? Is it the people who are going to do the work, or somebody else does the estimates? So if we're trying to decide how many developers we need, and we already have them, is that, I'm a little unclear. How do the estimates help us decide how many developers we're going to need?
I think, so I had a really bad example, a really bad experience with estimates recently. And it was, it's an AngularJS website and in Azure. Me and the other developer and the rest of the team with no AngularJS experience and no Azure experience, and they want estimates. But they want to know, is this going to be a 2, 3 months, 6 months? So we're pulling these estimates out of thin air, and they're used for planning the department. You missed it by a mile.
Yes. So if we want to know how long it will take, what are we then going to do with that information? That's what we're after here.
Tell our customers when it's going to be finished.
We want to tell our customers when it'll be finished. So this is an important thing. The customers really want to know. So we feel we need to give it to them. This is the problem. We want to pretend that we can predict the future. But if I could predict the future, I wouldn't bother doing software development. I can think of many easier, more fun ways to make a living if I could predict the future.
But I think estimates is also a way to level set the expectations, because imagine somebody giving you work and saying, well, I think this could be done, but if you smartly estimate it, you can actually make them understand that it cannot be delivered. And the way to do it is by playing the same cards that they are playing on you, which is like, I think it can be done. So
I'm going to go back to the very beginning, which you were not here for. People become defensive and want to defend their estimates. I'm not asking us to defend estimates here. I'm asking us to keep an open mind. We want to believe that estimates will be helpful to us. It's a trick we play on ourselves, and that's what I'm talking about here today. It's not that I want to stop this conversation, but I want us to keep an open mind and start thinking about what are the problems with estimates because we want to believe that they actually help us. We want to believe that.
I've used it in scenarios where it has actually helped us, because if you're dealing with managers who believe in waterfall way of working, where they want to know the costs and the time and the scope up front, it is the best tool that the development team can use to leverage, the fact that you cannot predict, things. That
So we're going to predict things.
Really big.
What's that?
You make it really big, and then they go, why is it really big?
So no matter what, I'm asking us to question our practices. So you're making an assumption that this is actually working, and I'd be happy to have this conversation with you, but I've been doing this for many, many years, and I've never seen estimates actually working for software development. So I want to see the proof. Okay, I want to see it. Do you have it with you?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead and prepare it. I want to see your proof.
Can I send it?
You can send it to me. I want to see the proof. How do you prove you made good decisions based on estimates?
Because, again, I have just 3 pictures to show how I kind of made sure that the estimates benefited not only the teams, but also the management. And maybe at the end of the session I can...
So I would like to see that. Let's see where we go next here. I've asked for this in front of thousands of audience members, and I've never yet seen proof. And if you have proof, I want to see it. Okay, so in software development, we use estimates to attempt to predict the future. When will it be done? How much will it cost? What can we get done for this sprint? How many people will we need? These are the things you were just sharing with me. But this is just some information that we're getting. Are these facts? We're making decisions based on guesses. These are not facts. These are guesses at the very best. The results are merely information. What do we do with this information? I've given it away several times. What is the real purpose of the estimates? I've out and out told you in the last 2 or 3 sentences several times.
It helps you to negotiate on scope.
We should never have to negotiate on scope. Okay? What do we want to do with this information? Please somebody. Well, okay, the people who actually want these estimates, what are they going to do with them? The ones who are going to use them.
Predict the future.
Well, so the predictions have been made. What are we going to do? They're going to make decisions. You heard what I said. This is a representation of we use estimates to help us make decisions. But I'm very worried about this, as you can see. Also, we often hear this, that we use them to spark a conversation. Why do we want to have that conversation?
Lack of knowing each other, lack of trust in somebody else's ability.
So, but now we've had the conversation and now we trust each other. What are we going to do? We make decisions. That's exactly right. The conversation is to make a decision. How many stories can we do in this sprint? Which is a faulty decision to be trying to make. But this isn't helping us decide who should buy the product or whether we should buy this product or not. The kind of decision is, should we develop it in-house or should we have someone else do it? How many developers do we need to hire? These are the kinds of decisions we're trying to make. Now, if it's for our customer to make a decision, should we use this firm to do our software development? Is our estimate the only one they're getting? Or are they going to some other vendors as well? If they're going to other vendors, then ours has to be low enough to convince them that our pricing is where they want it to be, but high enough so they don't think that we're complete idiots. How are they going to use this information? If we're selling the software to someone else, we're selling the development, they need to make a decision based on our estimates. How do companies actually make money in that scenario? Does anybody here know? Tell me. I can tell you, but I want to hear from you. What's that?
Half the estimate.
They cut the estimate quite low, but where do they make the money?
Support. Maintenance.
Maintenance,
Change request.
change requests. Look at every contract that comes along that way. If they don't clearly say, we're giving you a really, really, really low estimate because we're going to make it back in the change requests, they're being deceitful. That's deceptive. I hope you see that. I hope you don't feel I'm calling you out too much because I hope you don't work for companies like that. So what are the kinds of decisions we're going to make? Usually it's going to be, should we do project A or project B? Or should we do this thing first or that thing first? Or do we have to hire some more developers, or all sorts of things? That's the kind of decisions we're going to be making. Boy, I hope this isn't too depressing to you. It's a good thing it's the beginning of summer and you're all lighthearted right now. And it's not like, oh, there's a dreary winter coming. Right now, you at least can feel not too depressed. I did this workshop in Iceland in November a few years ago. And by the end of the day, everybody was getting rather depressed. I was kicking it off early for them. Yeah. So this is what I'm not really telling you much. I'm just telling you what it is, why we do these. Now, how late are we going to go here? Are we going till midnight? So we only have like maybe 20 minutes left. Is that about right? Do we have an end time? 9 o'clock. Till 9 o'clock. Oh, then I better slow down. Because I've been going too quick. Now, I really honestly have over 2 days of material, so we're fine. So if we're going to go to 9, I'll go to 9. Yeah, I'm going to do this next section kind of quickly here. I'm going to offer a bunch of questions that I think we should be considering. I'm not going to give you any answers. I'm just going to tell you the kinds of things we should be thinking about. So we're going to skip over this one. The first principle is we should not fool ourselves, and we are the easiest person to fool. Okay? So I'm going to go on to questions in a minute. This is from Peter Block. Again, not a question yet, but about questions. Transformation comes more from pursuing profound questions than seeking practical answers. We want answers most of the time. My dad would have said the answer is not in the answers. The answer's not in the answers. If we go for the answers, we're jumping the real process. It's about looking for good questions. Deming says it this way: if you don't know how to ask the right question, you discover nothing. This is important stuff. So I'm going to talk about, this was the first talk I ever gave at a big conference on no estimates, and it's basically just a bunch of questions. It was a 7-minute lightning talk. We want control and certainty about time, cost, and schedule. Why do we want that? Why do we want that? Is that important to us? Now, I'm not answering these questions. I'm saying these are the kinds of questions we need to be asking. Can we improve our chance at wonderful if we stop trying to get predictability? Can we give up this desire to know how much it's going to cost and get something better in exchange for it? Can something like estimates that seems so right, how could it be so wrong? And I love this picture. This is from Hansel and Gretel, and I love this like smoke coming out of the chimney. It's like things that look good aren't always really good. How much work does it take before we have enough information, enough understanding to make a reasonable estimate? I won't give you an answer, but Bob Martin, who seems to be for estimates, says the only time we know how much something will cost or how long it will take is the moment we're done with it. Another great one. How do we know it was a good decision? Now, I don't know if I brought oh yes, I did. I brought a decision-making tool with me. Nope, we're not going to do the project. Of course, according to Kahneman, that is as good as all of our decision-making processes. We are actually worse than the flip of a coin. It's worth. Have you read his book, Thinking Fast and Slow? Well worth the read. Are the things we think we want a trap? Are we tricking ourselves into thinking this is what we should do because we've invested in it already? Do we become less flexible? I love this picture. To become less flexible, do these estimates act as a hardening agent? Once we've invested in the estimates and we've made a decision to go ahead, we're reluctant to reverse that decision. Is the only way to get better at something to do more or practice it or learn to get better? I'm going to give an example. When I'm on these trips, I gain weight. I'm going to be gone for a month, so when I get home, I'll probably weigh 5 to 10 pounds more than when I left. Everywhere I go, they want to feed me. And then you go out to dinner, And then they have fika, like up in Sweden. You have a lunch with a sweet cake and some coffee, and they always have bowls of candy. Everywhere I go, and I kind of have a sweet tooth, I can't hardly resist eating the candy. So tell me, how can I get better at eating candy so I don't gain weight? Should I chew it faster? Swallow it whole? Chew it slower? Wrap it in a carrot? Should I dunk it in water? What can I do that will make eating that candy not allow me to gain weight? What can I do? Somebody tell me. Don't eat it. So getting better, which I want to lose the weight, doesn't mean I have to get better at eating the candy. I got to do something else. Now we can say go walk. And so I do. I try to walk 5 to 10 miles every day when I'm on these trips. But that doesn't make eating the candy any better. It just gives me an excuse. Well, I walked 10 miles. I can eat some candy.
Break the candy down into small bits and have one bit each day.
So let's eat a lot less of it. So we can get better if we have less of some things. Let's use that for estimates. Is the type of decisions we're making that require that we use estimates, are those the only types of decisions that we can be making? Are there others? Are there other ways to think about our work? So I'm going to go on to this one. Is being on time and on budget a good measure of our results? Tell me. Could that ever be a good way to judge our decision making? This would be the most faulty way to go. What's more important? At least something about the value. Now, we don't get into value estimates. I want to make it clear here. I only talk about the estimates for the cost because value is a bigger mess than the estimates for cost. But you're right. We were more interested in what did we get out of it. If you're doing software development that isn't paying back 10, 20, or 100 times what you're putting into it, you shouldn't be doing software development. If you have to judge, if this is going to make us a little more than that, and this is going to cost us a little less than that, those aren't the kinds of decisions we need to be making. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a couple things. I've seen these things. Please forgive me. Don't put your hands up or anything. First of all, a way to make it on time and on budget I've seen done is feature cuts. Is that still on time and on budget? 8. Working late or extra hours to meet the estimated date goals. Did that mean we got it done on time? No. This one is out and out unethical. Not recording all hours to the project so it looks like we met the goals. I won't ask you if you've ever done that. I was on a project once where the manager came to me and said, you can't put your hours against this project anymore because we've run out of budget on it, so we're going to put it on this other one. And I said, well, that's good. You can do that, but I'm not going to do that. That's unethical. I say that might be bordering on being illegal. Probably is. I'm not going to do that, but you can do anything you want. So if you want to sign my name, that's up to you. You can do that. This is unethical. I think this is bordering on unethical to claim we got it done on time, but everybody had to work 80 hours a week. I hope you've never had to work 80 hours a week. You get the idea. Okay, so that's the only one I come close to giving you an answer on. Fear of losing control is a big barrier of change. This is Bjarte Buksnes. Although most control is just an illusion of control. We have no control. But the fear is real. The fear is real, and we can't ignore it. This is the problem in most companies. Managers believe those estimates are needed or we will lose control. And they don't have any control. But what they're doing, well, let's go on to a little bit more. Is this okay, or am I just being too preachy to you?
You're good.
We're okay? At least one person here thinks I'm okay.
Is there a happy ending?
No. But I can share how I've worked if you want. Because it's basically, if you're all Agilists, this is an Agile group, right? You already know. So somebody tell me in the Agile Manifesto or principles where it says anything about estimates. It doesn't say anything about it. Why, as Agilists, do we think estimates are even partly meaningful? It's a trick we're playing on ourselves so we can keep our jobs. You know why we're doing planning poker? Is this going to be shown anywhere? They're filming this. I hope not. I think that planning poker exists as something teams do because it's so dang easy to train people to do it. So the coaches get paid for doing trainings that seem to fulfill something meaningful. Boy, now I'm going to get sued or something. I wasn't talking about planning poker. By the way, my name is Ron Jeffries. Ron, forgive me, that's just a joke. Hopefully no one will ever see that. So quickly, let's go through this. Since I don't have time to do any exercises, this will get us to a point where I can talk about how I've worked, which isn't all that important. I start out by telling you this. You're all as smart, at least, as I am. I'm just sharing some thinking that I've done that could be useful to you. You figure out your own way. I started collecting things other people were saying about estimates. I'm going to show you some images now. Do you know who Mary Poppendieck is? If you've never heard her speak, you should. She's brilliant. I never miss a chance to hear her. If she's speaking at a conference I'm at, I just saw her in France not even a month ago. Brilliant. She's written a lot of books. She's quite brilliant. This was at XP 2016. Estimates are for cost centers, not for products. And I had a long talk with her, and she took my No Estimates workshop just because she thought it sounded interesting. It was a short one, a 4-hour one. But before she took that, she had done her talk, her keynote, and this is what she said. I copied it down. I went up to her and I said, is this an accurate quote? I want to make sure I got it correctly. She said, yep, you can use that. Estimates for cost centers. Software development is not cost center. Software development is product development. Kent Beck. You all must know who Kent Beck is, and if you don't know, please read his books. Brilliant, brilliant man. The first book I read of his was this one, the white version of it. I think this one's called the green version. But anyways, this is a great book. It really is about effective software development. And I met him for the first time just a few months ago. Brilliant guy. An alternative to estimates. Do the most important thing until it is shipped or it's no longer the most important thing. And I would modify that only a little bit from my own approach, and that is do anything that seems important. If you've deemed 50 things are important, just pick one of them and do it. Because by doing it, you will figure out the next thing you want to do, and pretty soon you'll really understand what this project's about. Until you do that, all the estimates and all the future planning, all the requirements documents, they're just waste. Martin Fowler, who I don't think agrees with me on anything, but I found a quote that made him look like he does. As teams progress, at first they struggle with estimation, and they can get quite good at it. And then they find they often don't need it. I'd rather start here, and often not needing it. And then if we absolutely need them, let's find a way. But dang, this is where I've started with a lot of teams over the last few years. Let's not do those estimates. What are they for? They're a waste of time. Yes?
The problem is that by the time you reach that third point, your maturity has gone up.
Certainly, your maturity has gone up, but we can start there, and I can easily show you how to do that.
No, of course.
Okay, good.
If you're dealing with a lot of people who have got that, who are used to estimating,
Sure.
They want a transition. So rather than going from 30,000 feet to 500 meters or below the sea level, they want that transition to be
Sure. So people want that smooth transition, which they will never actually complete. So my point is, yeah, let's just start here. And we can. I've done it a number of times. We fool ourselves into believing those estimates are useful, and we want to have a path to slowly wean ourselves. Oh man, I got to be really careful. Wean ourselves from from using the estimates. Should be appropriate for an audience including people of many different backgrounds and ages. Well, I'm doomed. Michelle McCarthy. I love this saying from her. One of the problems with the schedule is it gives us the idea that we can take that long. Is that like there's a principle like that work, Parkinson's law. The work will grow to fill the time we've allotted for it. We need a different way of thinking. Now, Ron Jeffries, who's many years disagreed with me, it seems he's come around. I could be wrong. Estimating when will be done is wrong. Forcing the answer is worse. So this is Ron Jeffries. And I actually think his book, this book here is worth its weight in gold. Get the book and read it. He says, buy it from pragmatic programmers. If you buy it anywhere else, he gets much less of a royalty, so buy it from them. So, let's go on. Double Panchal. So he says, and this is one of the most brilliant ones, estimates presuppose a solution. The only way you can make an estimate is you know what it will take to solve the problem. Do we ever know that at the beginning of software development? If we do, we are not doing software development. If we know the solution before we start working on it, we're not doing software development. We're just doing work we've already done. Why do we bother doing it twice? With software development, we can use that code we already did. Alrighty, so this is from Russell Akoff, and I'm going to give you my own version in a minute. Managers who don't know how to measure what they want settle for wanting what they can measure. Does that make sense? You understand what that means? If you don't know how to measure what you need to measure, then you're going to settle for what you can measure. And this is a big problem, but I'm going to take it a step further on this next slide. I don't think most of the stuff that matters can be measured. So that's a much bigger problem. We then convince ourselves that we will value the things we can measure. That's broken. Peter Drucker says most of what we consider management or call management is actually making hard for people to work. All right, so I'm going to tell you how I've worked for a number of years now. I started first doing this in product development back in the early 90s, where I was doing custom manufacturing. But it applies even better to a lot of software development. So pretend they came in with this stack of, let's pretend it's a big document of requirements. So I had a company, I got called in 2003, I think it was 2003, by a woman who was the lead developer at a company. And she called me up and she said, hey, I just quit. So why did you quit? She said, the boss was yelling at me and he was yelling at me more and more, and we're really stuck on this project. We're not going to get through it. And it's just a nightmare. And I said, okay, well, why bother calling me? She says, well, the boss asked me what to do, and she said, you should call Woody because he's been telling you what to do for the last couple years and you're not listening to him. So they had started developing this project to add features to an existing project. They'd gotten things so messed up and their source control so out of whack that they couldn't revert back to a time when it was working unless they reverted back to the day they started, because their source repository had become corrupted. So I went in to meet with the guy. Oh no, the guy called me. The boss called me and said, hey, I really need some help. My lead developer quit and I'm trying to figure out what to do. I said, why did she quit? Of course I knew. So why did she quit? And he said, well, I was yelling at her. I said, oh, this is easy. Stop yelling at people. He said, well, it's too late. She's gone. And she did. She quit. She never came back there. So I went in and I looked at his document. They had estimated everything. It had 100 pages of stuff. It looked like, you know, a thick document. And I looked at it and I said, well, if I'm going to help you, I can't learn what this is in a week or in a month. It would take me a long time to read this and digest it. Pick something in here you'd really like to have, and let's try a little work on that and see if this, so I'm going into the middle of it. He found the thing. He said, well, this is something I really want. Now remember Kent Beck said, you know, work on the most important thing. I didn't care. I just wanted something that was important to them. And this is what I did. I read it with him sitting there, and I said, I can't understand most of this. Can you break it down into some smaller pieces? So he explained the different pieces, and I said, hey, it sounds like this bit we can deliver without this bit. How about if we start on this? And then we looked at it for a while, and I said, okay, is this needed? Is that needed? How does that work? What is this going to do? And I found we could get rid of chunks of this. I'm going to do it in little bits because it's kind of fun. Got rid of that part, and we got rid of that part. And I said, that looks like something I can probably work on, so we're going to work on this for a day and see what we get. And at the end of the day, I called him over and said, hey, we've got a prototype for you to look at. And we showed him what this little bit was. Oh, by the way, I had reverted the code back to the day before they started working on it. There's no reason to try and fix a bunch of broken stuff. So I said, this is an experiment. You'll only be out a week or two of costs, and let's see if we can get a handle on this. We did this much on that first thing. It was way less than half of it. And I said, will this suit? Will this be helpful? He said, yeah, that little bit is good. We might want to add some of this afterwards. So that's okay. We're going to deploy this. And then if the people like it, we'll add some more. So he had a clinic, a bunch of doctors. And so we deployed it, and they could start using this new functionality. Then I said, what do you want to work on next? Do you want to bring some of this in? He said, well, no, there's something else I'd like. And we've got that thing. Now I'm going to do it real quickly. Same thing again. We found some little bit, started talking about it, got the stuff I could understand, removed the stuff that I could decouple, kept together the stuff that was cohesive. I hope you all understand that, you're software development people. We did that 3 times. We're only about this about a week and a half or so. Same thing. I can't understand all this. Give me a little bit. We got about this much of the project done. Okay. Remember, we started with all of this. To me, this was like this artwork. The customer thought they had defined everything really well, but I couldn't understand it. I'm not an idiot. I'm partly an idiot. And so he thought everything was clear and like got everything nice divided into these size test tubes. And everything's neatly put together as it belongs, you know. But nobody else can understand it. Written language. Does anybody here know Wheel's Law? Have you ever heard of Wheel's Law? Well, I'm going to divert us for a second. How can that be? You should know this, memorize it, recite it to your children tonight. Wheel's Laws. Always go to Wikipedia. It is the one source of truth in the universe. The fundamental Wheel's Law states communication usually fails except by accident. If communication can fail, it will. If communication cannot fail, it still most usually does. If communication seems to succeed in the intended way, there's a misunderstanding. If you are content with your message, communication certainly fails. This is truth. This is truth. Look it up. It's actually in Wikipedia. He's a professor up in Finland, I believe. You can tell he must be Finnish. He's got 2 I's and an O in his name. So let's see if it says where he's from. I don't see if it says Osmo A. Wheel. Anyways, you get the idea? A document this large is almost never useful. Let's go on. The product owners and the people making requirements think that they've defined everything clearly, but it looks like this to me. If we're going to use a work of art to demonstrate what a requirement document looks like, and it's worse than that, because we think we know the edges, but we don't. We're in the middle here, and we're looking at stuff, and we start, oh, we're getting near done. Oh, wait, there's a whole bunch more of this over there. And we can look down through the middle and see there's a bunch more down there. This is how I think software management kind of is. So the first rule you saw I taught earlier, it's in the doing of the work that we discover the work that we must do. Do you need to leave? So everybody know, if you've got to go, that won't hurt my feelings, because I know we all have schedules we need to meet. Or really, to put it more clearly, inside I will be breaking, but outside I will look like I am proud and happy. Remember, I shared this with you earlier. Once we start doing the work, we learn about the reality of it. It wasn't until I started doing the work for them that we started learning the reality of it. We delivered bits of this project. The reality is exposed by doing the work. Then we can start thinking about what do we want to do next. So we skip ahead a few things. What I'm looking for, rather than size to work on something, I'm looking for certain qualities. Is it potentially valuable? Is it understandable? I need to get an understanding. Is it distinct, which means it's clearly its own thing? Is it cohesive? These bits belong together. I want to remove anything that isn't part, that isn't cohesive with the rest. Then I can develop that alone. This requires absolutely no estimates. We're using the same criteria that real estimates, not story points, which are not real estimates. Real estimates would consider all kinds of criteria, and we can use that criteria to understand the project, but it doesn't give us estimates. When these qualities are found, then I have something I can work on. And again, it requires no estimates. It can be decoupled, worked on, deployed, used, and we can get feedback. This is what Agile software development is about. So if we do some small part, then we can discover what we want to do next. And we can continue like this forever. This is what Agile is. Hopefully I really don't need to explain this to an Agile group. This is why Agile exists. So an example that I usually give is called the 12 calculations example. But this was a medical application used by doctors in their patient interactions. And it was a very important application. If the application didn't work right and somebody's records were jumbled up, it could mean somebody could be, even could die from that. So this was important work. What we did here is what I like to call the 80-20, 80-20. If the Pareto principle applies to software, then something like 20% of what we develop has most of the value in it, maybe 80%. So if we could just work on those things, why don't we do it? Somebody tell me why we can't do that. We don't yet know what they are. Who's your boss, may I ask? Give her a raise. I mean, right now. I mean, this is exactly right. She's gotten 4 or 5 of these things correct, and only 1 or 2 wrong. No, I don't think you got anything wrong. Thank you. That's exactly right. We don't know. We can't know ahead of time what they are. That's why we want to steer towards it. We want to start doing something so we can figure out what's actually important. So if we found one of those things that we think is a 20%, I only want to do 20% of it. That's why I want to rip it apart as much as possible. This is actually the amount of work that we did. These are the parts we ripped off of it, but this is what we took it out of. We've now done some small part, but if we did this purely and perfectly, how much of the work of a project would we need to do? How much?
20%.
How much?
20%.
Measure again. If we do only 20% of the 20%, 4%. What I found, believe it or not, when we peel that off and do it, we are starting to discover really quickly what's important. And this is what I found. We can do less than 4% of most projects if we work in this manner. So I've started, at the clients I'd worked at, started asking them, rather than write all those documents up front, let's just start on something you think is important, and then let's deliver that and see what we learn. And we're going to do as little about it as possible. This is what happened. Well, somebody tell me. We got these things done. This was still waiting. What do you think this boss did? I ended up working there 4 years, by the way. What do you think he said next? I said, which one of these do you want to do? None of them. This was the main stuff I wanted to get done. I asked him, why do you have all this? Well, that's how we get projects through, is we put a lot of value in them. Have you ever experienced that? You have to make it look like there's a lot to do there. Less than 4%. I call this deliver features until bored. When they're bored with it, then you know you got the meat of it. I think it's kind of like the difference between, you go to the doctor, and they go, this happened to me. I had you ever heard of kidney stones? They make it sound like that's really, really painful, and it kind of is. So I went into the doctor. I said, man, I don't know what's wrong, but I think I'm dying. And he said, checked me out and said, you got some kidney stones here. So they put me on a morphine drip while they were doing some stuff to figure out what to do. And I was useless. I was just totally useless. And then the next day, I needed to go to my daughter's college. She was having a ceremony. And I said, boy, I can't go to the ceremony if I'm all doped up on morphine. You know what morphine is, right? It's like, have you ever had that? It's completely disabling. So the doctor said, well, you just take some ibuprofen. So I took the ibuprofen, and I got through the day just fine. This is the ibuprofen method instead of the morphine method. The morphine method is like you go all in, but you can't do anything else. Like I couldn't do anything. I couldn't drive a car. I couldn't go to my daughter's college, whatever. This is sort of the difference. Do we want to spend and incapacitate our companies by spend so much by trying to do everything of every project we want to do? Or can we get by with just doing that 4%? In this case, it was way less than 4%. He actually said, I went in that after about 2 or 3 weeks, and I said, okay, what do you want to do next? Do you want to bring some of the more features back to these things, or what do you want to do? He said, well, I actually have this other project I've been dying to do. I want to do that one now. So we did the same thing on that one. They never asked me for an estimate after that. This is the idea of looking for the situation where they're ready to move, instead of working with the customers who will never move. There's lots of ways to do this. They call that finding the ideal customer. If we can work in a truly agile way, let's crank up our ability to have these many small, inexpensive attempts at value. Let's just do, discover, validate, and steer to the next thing. That, of course, is a diagram that everyone needs to see, so you know you went to an agile talk. It has a circle in it. Circle tells you, yes, this was agile. But this process is what I've been doing for a long time. The first time I experienced this was the first software project I worked on, which was for myself in 1982. And I bought a computer to use in the business I had. I had a business that I could tell was going to be, the computers were going to take over that business, that industry. So I thought I better learn about computers, so I bought a computer. And I bought 2 computers, actually. One was a dedicated fabrication computer that would cut stuff out of vinyl film, and it worked pretty well. The other one was a regular, what you might consider a PC, but it was in the pre-PC days, and it was an Osborne. I don't think you got those over here in the UK, but it was an American brand of computer, quite good. But that month they had gone out of business, and you could buy one for half price. So I went and bought one. Matter of fact, have you ever heard of the Osborne, I think they call it the Osborne principle. They went out of business because they announced their next coming computer was going to be twice as good as the first one and cost very little more. And nobody would buy the first one anymore. So they were stuck with a bunch of inventory they couldn't sell and no way to continue business. So you'll see Apple and everybody uses a different approach now to sell these highly overrated, expensive Twitter machines. Did everybody bring your Twitter? I'm going to see if anybody did bring their Twitter machine, because you'd be tweeting about this. Let's see. Well, there's a few. Come on, people. You can't hardly have a living in software development if you're not tweeting stuff. But I will warn you, do not try to tweet and drive. I tried this, and you will just tweet out nonsense. Because you're trying to drive and tweet. It's dangerous, because people will think he's an idiot. So don't do that. So this is exactly what Agile gives us. This ability to try little stabs. Somebody said stab over here, at value, over and over and over. This is what Agile gives us. And I've been working this way for over 10 years solid, and before that, every chance I got going back into the late 90s. So that first job that I mentioned in 1999, when I actually was doing work for other people doing software development, they didn't do any estimates. They just merely charged per the week for their work. Matter of fact, as far as I remember, they would, if you wanted them for this week, you'd need to book it in advance and pay for it in advance, so that he would sell his shop for a certain rate. There are other ways to do it, drip funding and many other ways. I was at Hunter Industries, with the mob programming for 4 years, and we didn't do a single estimate while I was there. One of my conditions of being hired, I told them, was we're not going to do estimates. And I said, here's what I will need to have. I need a letter from the CEO, the head person of the company, that says, did I already tell you this? I don't think I did. It has to say, this manager and his team are forbidden. They are not allowed to do estimates. So, because I knew people would come to me asking for estimates, and I wanted to say, I'd love to do your estimates, but I'm not allowed to. And that was one of my conditions of being hired there. I'd learned this many years earlier. Look for the customers who are ready to do things in a better way. If you're just looking for customers who are going to keep your company with business, you're always going to be doing business with people you wish you weren't doing business with. What if we always did business with people that were uplifting to us, who appreciated what we did, who want to make things better? It would be a better world if we could have that. Now remember, there are 86 parts here, so we're only on the 6th one. So I'm going to cover one little thing about turning up the good and how I use it sometimes. If you know of me, then you know I have this thing I call turn up the good. At the end of every day, the team has a retrospective, and we ask ourselves, well, what went well today? And if somebody says something that went well, we will then ask ourselves, what can we do to turn that up for tomorrow? Not 2 weeks from now. We're going to do this every evening, just before we go home, and we're going to figure out a way to turn up the good tomorrow. If we can do that, we will get continuous improvement, and it's a compounding effect. If you're earning the compounding interest in your bank account, and they only compound it yearly, that's no good. What if it's every 6 months? What if it's every 6 weeks? What if it's every 2 weeks? What if it's daily? Daily compounded is more. It will end up being a lot more. And actually, the numbers are quite high. If you can get a daily compounding of your turning up the good. So I also use this as a way to make judgments about things. How do you turn up the good on estimates? Well, you break them into little bits and only eat one little bit of it. That's the whole point here. If you have to do estimates for something, fine. But I'm going to caution us about that. So what if we turn up our ability to rapidly deliver valuable, potentially useful software? Which is it better to do? Turn up the good on estimates by getting better at doing estimates, or turn up the good on delivering useful software? Which would be better to do? Where should we focus? Let's turn up our ability to discover and deliver value. If we got good at that, we probably would never need to worry about estimates again. So the bigger idea was this, I think I shared earlier. It's let's create this environment where great things can happen, and then we have a chance of great things happening. I've had enough chances to do this. I'm pretty confident this works. So I'm going to ask a couple little easy questions. So what should we be certain about? Based on what I just told you, let's be certain that we have this environment where great things can happen, so that the great things are inevitable. What would it take to do that? Now, I've had a lot of good role models. Finding good role models is part of what gives us that. And what must we control? This is what I think we need to control. We need to control our urge to control things. If we're going to control something, let's just give up this desire for certainty and control and realize that we maybe can get a lot better if we don't have it. The example I gave you here, these people have spent a year's worth of money getting nothing. And then we spent 3 weeks worth of money delivering real value, and it made them realize the rest of this was useless. This is what I want. So I think we covered more than enough. Are there any questions? I didn't think so. Now I'll give you time. You want to ask any questions?
I'll take this opportunity to advocate your opinion on this. It's not a question.
Uh-oh.
My company has implemented a KPI for the year on developers that says your estimates and your actuals must be within 15%. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, so here's the problem with it. I think it's a Deming quote. If you incentivize a manager, they will do anything to get that incentive, even if it means the ruination of the company. This is the problem with these kinds of programs. If they want it to be within 15%, how long has this company been in business? If they haven't figured this out in 150 years, what makes them think this year is the year they're going to figure it out? You know, I have been in this business solid since 1999, and for the 15 years before, software development for myself. Once I started doing it for other people, everybody was saying, and I took notes that after that first one in '99 that I mentioned earlier about the 200 developers, I started taking notes. Everywhere I went, they were complaining about the estimates and wanted to get better at them. How many years are we going to do the cycle of continuous no improvements? You cannot get better at guessing the future. Gamblers think you can. Gamblers think that we're going to get on a roll. That, boy, the odds are in my favor now because I've lost for 2 years in a row. So now is my year. This is my big year. We're pretending. I have no solution for you. I offer you my condolences. Any other questions? Yes?
A lot of the stuff that you've spoken about is really easy for the person at the center of the problem to buy into.
It can be.
From your experience, how do you take the momentum? What do you have to do to take the momentum when maybe one team is brought into this, but they need the rest of the organisation alongside.
I am really lousy at convincing people to do anything. When I was a kid, my brother could pick up a stick and go, fetch, and the dog would run and fetch it. And I could pick up the same stick and say, fetch, the same way, and the dog would just sit there. I don't know how to do that. I really don't know. I would offer this. If you look for allies in the company, you will find enough people who are willing to make progress on this, and you can take slow steps through to it. What my dad would have taught me, and I believe is quite true, is that, that if we look for the desperate situations, that's where the gains will happen. So I first started using that in a large company back in 2003 or 4. I was first starting to build allies throughout the company. I was looking for anybody who was willing to talk about better ways. And I was very cautious about it because I didn't want to make enemies and have people say, oh, that guy, he's going to ruin everything for us. And then we started looking for opportunities. And those opportunities are when something is already failing. And I would then offer to, they would say, we need somebody to take over this. We got to figure out what's going on. And I would always offer to do that. Because it's already failing. They're just looking for somebody to blame. But then we have the opportunity to be free in how we approach it. Because that's what my deal would always be. I'll take that over as long as I get to do it my own way. And they're happy to, because they know in a few months they get to blame me for the failure. But it didn't necessarily happen that way. It actually went quite well. So those are my things. I call this looking for the ideal customer. You look for that situation where they really value. If you do it right, they'll really value that, and that you can, you have the freedom to make those changes. So I would say for me, it's usually been outside. In other words, those opportunities came outside of the company, and that's why. So I often did night jobs, where like this one I explained, that started out, they just called me. It started out as a night job. It was my night job for 4 years. I worked 20 hours a week on that project, and besides my regular job. My daughter was in college. I needed to find a way to pay for that. So that's life. Have a kid. That's another. If you're going to have success, have a kid, because then you need to spend way more money than you ever thought. Another question.
So I'm trying to get the understanding right. So you're not just saying no estimates is not going to magically work. So you're saying that you have to break it down so that you can say that, okay, please try out this piece of work. We'll experiment on this small piece of work that we understand clearly, and then see at the end of the week or a couple of weeks.
That's right. So basically, we're going to break things down, and we're going to experiment with something. And what we learn from that will help us go forward. Now, that doesn't help us make the decision, should we do this project or that project? Right? But I'm going to kind of warn us about this. If we think that's, remember when I said earlier, are there other kinds of decisions we could be making? I don't think we ever should decide, should we do this project or that project? We should do them both if we think they're valuable to us. But we should do them in such a way that we can discover the value in little bits, so we're not betting the farm on it. Let's do it in a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and see if we can discover the value. That's why I said a few slides ago, let's see if I can get back a few slides here. It's not doing it for me. Let's go to here.
The tricky bit is finding the person who knows what the next thing is and has enough scope and respect that nobody will question them about what the next thing is.
Well, that should be the product owner. This is what we want to be doing. If our product owners aren't that way, they're not actually product owners. They're surrogate or proxy product owners. And we need to improve that part of our industry. Are there any product owners here? Okay, so the only one who will admit it. The product owner has to actually understand the product. It's like if you go into the doctor, you're the body owner, and you go, I've got a pain. And if you're going to work with the doctor well, you're going to be able to explain a lot about it, let them do the experiments they need. They're going to discover how to hopefully help you or tell you how soon you're going to die. And so that's sort of the same thing. You've got to be that much of an expert on the situation. We need to have these crankability to have many small, inexpensive attempts at value. And if we get good at this, then we have a chance. If we think, well, how many successful projects have there been that didn't deliver anything for a year or two? This was the big failure in this industry, and it still is, for many decades. Agile was about finding a way out of that. Okay, hopefully that was helpful.
Yes, can I ask you?
Yes, please.
So, in order to get, so everybody needs some amount of predictability, right?
No, I'm saying we don't. So she's saying everybody needs an amount of predictability, and I'm saying no, we don't. We need something different than predictability.
So the product owner will say, I don't just need this. This is the most important now, but I need this and this and this.
I don't just need this, I need, this is the most important thing, but I need all these other things too. And what I'm saying is we need to find a way to not work that way. What we need to do is have a way to say, we're going to try something that's important to us, and then we will decide what next is important to us, with the hopes of not ever needing all of that. So rather than do all this work, and this is how people have worked with me, Hunter is a very good example. They used to do these long documents. They no longer need to do these long documents. All they need to do is have the idea of what this thing's supposed to do. We'll discover what to do in the doing of it. So it's basically asking us to change the way we think about developing software. I'm not saying anybody can actually do that. It's the experiences that I've had. Most companies, you're going to have trouble doing this kind of stuff. In fact, I know now of 3 people who went back to their company after hearing me do a talk like this who ended up getting fired.
Thank you for the warning.
Oh, very much so. I'm very genuine in this. Matter of fact, one of them had me come to the company and speak. David, where's David? And have me speak, and then that person ended up getting fired. Interestingly, in the back of the room, there was a man standing there the whole time like this. And I didn't have the brain power to realize that was the CEO. So he came up after the workshop. This was 6 years ago. He came up after the workshop, and he wanted to argue with me about a kitchen remodel. And I know how to shred people with the kitchen remodel argument. So he didn't stand a chance. In front of 100 of his developers, I was telling him why that it was a fallacy. His argument was a fallacy. So that didn't go so well for the person who brought me in. And so, yeah, be cautious. So look for the companies and the places to work where they're ready to make the real changes. Any other questions? I have this part here that I call the encore. And we have 5 minutes left. So thank you for the encore. So you're too kind. This is how a lot of planning looks. And my brain can't understand that. That's why I ask, give me something of slight importance. This is the system in place at most places you go nowadays. To know what the real system is, it's not the documents. It's not what they say their system is. It's how people actually get stuff done, or at least keep the company going. I recommend giving a look at this book by John Gall. It was written in the 70s, so you know it's got to be good, because that's before the internet. John Gall, The Systems Bible. A complex system that works is invariably found to have evolved from a simple system that worked. You cannot design a complex working system. It has to have evolved. If that's true, this is a very interesting thing. All working complex systems started out as a working simple system. So this is an example of it. Okay? Over millions of years, if you believe that. A simple system may or may not work. So we can create simple systems, but they may or may not work. Here's an example of one of them. You understand what's going on here? A few simple systems are working. Now, I kind of like this picture. It has nothing to do with anything. Have you seen that episode? You know what I'm talking about? It's brilliant. I like where he picks it up later and goes, oh, I see why. It's British. Made in England. Some complex systems actually work. And here's an example. Until man gets their hands on it. I put this in there many years ago, but it really is pertinent now. Big systems either work on their own or they don't. If they don't, you can't make them work. I'm lecturing you now. Big systems either work on their own or they don't. You can't make them work. That's just a nice picture of a grumpy cat. A complex system designed from scratch never works and cannot be patched to make it work. We believe that it can be. And since this is being recorded, I'm not going to mention anything about scaled agile frameworks at all. A working complex system that no longer is useful cannot be changed to make it work. It will keep doing what it used to do. And this is the problem with trying to make changes in existing organizations, especially the larger organizations. I like this picture. I think that's kind of pertinent to this. Notice none of these images were done, only a few by my wife, all the ones in the earlier part. My wife's a children's book author and illustrator. If you have a working complex system and no longer useful to you, you have to either start over with a working simple system, or you're going to be doomed. So I like this part here. I like this. You have to start over with a working simple system. So what can we do? I don't know. I think it's something like this. Provide an environment where simple systems are given a chance to work. We try lots of experiments. We have lots of these simple systems, so we will see which ones will end up working. And then we have to find a way to allow them to evolve. We cannot control their evolving. We can influence it. We can't control it and keep things as simple as possible. So I hope this was helpful. It's 9 o'clock. It's the end of this. Yeah, I hope this was helpful. I hope none of you get fired. Do you want to plug this back in?
Please. Right. So just quickly plug back in. We've just got one more slide to go. Okay, so before we do that, another big, huge round of applause for Woody.
No.
Brilliant stuff tonight. Okay, so if the screen comes back. So just very, very quickly, big thanks to our host, and this always feels weird saying this because I work here, but a big thanks to our host, my employer, Redgate. Thank you. Thanks again to Woody. Great talk. And thank you, most importantly, to everyone that turned up tonight. We hugely appreciate the support that you give this group. As I said, we're all just volunteers here. We're all just kind of sharing our ideas, listening to your ideas as well. So we love it when we've got a big crowd like this. So don't forget next month. Hint, hint. We would love your feedback as well. So this feedback board will flip back down in a second, and we're looking for what you felt went really well tonight and any areas that we can improve on for next month as well. So we are constantly listening to your feedback. So one thing we did forget tonight, which we apologise for, name badges. Sorry, there was too many of you. So that's a good thing. So yes, please drop some feedback there at the end. And apart from that, if you want to have the Slack channel, then just drop me your email address on one of the post-it notes and we'll get that sorted for you this week. And that's it. Thank you so much for tonight. You've all been awesome, and hopefully we'll see you again next month. Thank you.